Right, guys. I have here Saj Hussain. Thank you for making the time to do this interview with me.
Welcome.
Yeah. So, well, what I was going to do for you guys is that I'm going to ask, because Saj, I know he's a HMO guy, really big in the game. And so I know a lot of you guys are getting into property and most of you are going into HMO because I was speaking to some of you guys and you were looking into the other ones and HMO stuck out to all of you. So I know this would help you guys a lot. So I wanted to set this up and so I could just ask some basic questions so you can answer them. So hopefully you guys don't make any mistakes. So one of the questions I wanted to ask was that when you go into why did you choose HMO out of every other strategy? Like why did you not go into service accommodation, maybe lease options? Why did HMO stand out to you?
Okay, so I think Kabir, what might be really useful for me give you a little bit of background and context in terms of how I do HMOs. So I do HMOs as a core strategy, but I actually do many other things. So for example, I flip properties, I convert commercial properties into residential, I'm building houses. So I do quite a range of things, but HMOs tends to be my bread and butter activity. And the reason HMOs appeal to people, there's really one thing above everything else that makes HMOs such an appealing strategy, and that's nothing other than cash flow. That's the only thing that appeals to people when it comes to HMOs. It's really the fact that they make a lot more money than a standard single-let house would do. So I've started in property about 14 years ago now. So when I started, prior to that, a little bit of background for you, I've always worked for myself. I've always kind of been an entrepreneur, if you like, from a very early age, very driven, being involved in lots of different businesses. But my main business was IT. When I was at school, I was trading software. I used to sell software. Then when I went into college, didn't do too much there. But when I went to university, I continued getting involved in IT. This was kind of late 80s, 1980s at that time. And I was really interested in computing and business, so it just seemed like a logical decision to kind of put the two together and start a business around IT. And that's what I did in the early 90s, and I ran that for about 15 years, and I did very well out of that, made quite a lot of money at that time. But actually, due to a series of mistakes and maybe some immaturity on my part as well, before I had the Midas touch, I managed to screw it all up after 15 years, and the whole thing just came tumbling down and pretty much lost everything, wiped myself out, and started again. So, for a little while, I licked my wounds and then thinking about what to do. And many of the most wealthiest and successful people I knew, and whether it were clients, friends, associates, or people, I read about in the Sunday Rich List, they were all invested in property. And that's what really got me interested in property. And at that time, this was kind of pretty much a height to another recession, kind of 2006 time. We were just about to come into another recession. And I started looking at property, but I was struggling to kind of find my way. For 2 years, I was trying lots of different things, but not getting any kind of results. And the reason for that is because I was actually just trying so many different things. When you learn about property at the beginning, you realize there's so many ways to make money from property. But here's the thing, you can't make money in all of them. You have to pick one thing, focus on that, and stay focused on that, be persistent, and that's what gets the results. So I started off at the beginning sourcing property because I thought, hey, I haven't got very much money. If I can find deals and I can offer them to somebody else, I'll make a little bit of money from that. And that's really how I got started. So I started finding deals, packaging them up, selling them on 2,000, 3,000, sometimes even more in terms of a fee. And that started generating an income. That's really how I got started. And then I remember one time I had this deal, which I thought was a really good deal. The seller was about to get repossessed. He's about to lose his house. And I had somebody ready to purchase it, and I'd spent months trying to get this deal on track and make it work. Then the buyer at the time got a little bit sort of uncomfortable, saying, "Look, I'm not sure if this is going to work. I'm not sure if your numbers are the way I think they're going to be." He was not confident that he was going to rent for the figures I said it would probably rent. And I thought, look, if this buyer doesn't buy this deal, he's going to lose out on a good deal. The seller's going to get repossessed and be homeless out on the street. And I'll have spent months working on this deal and get nothing out of it. And I said to him, well, look, I'll tell you what we'll do. If you take this property on, I will get it rented at the figures I say I will. You don't need to pay me a fee, and if that works, then you can just pay me something out the rental profit. And I kind of stumbled into my first joint venture. So what I ended up doing was doing this deal, doing all the work, getting up and running, and fortunately it did work out the way I said it was going to. The buyer was very happy about it. The seller didn't get repossessed. And then I started getting a profit share. It wasn't very much, I think about £40-something a month. Really wasn't very much at all. But it meant that actually it was something better than nothing. And it took me several months later to realize, actually, if I start keeping some of these properties, not only am I now building equity in that deal, but I'm starting to get a little bit of income out of it as well.
Yeah.
So single lets I started doing, it was probably a few years, 2 years, something like that, before I thought, I'm going to have to do a lot of these deals before I get some comfortable income out of it. And that's really when I started looking at HMOs. So a bit of a long-winded answer to your question,
Yeah.
but that's really the backstory, and that's how I ended up doing HMOs. So I'm doing HMOs for about 10 years now.
10 years. Yeah, like, that's the thing. Because I've spoken to a lot of people starting out, and mostly teenagers, because I'm 15, and most of them they look at me as another fellow teen in the property game. And yeah, like I usually get these questions. It's like, what strategy should I use? Should I start out with? What do you recommend? And I can't really answer that question because I'm fairly new myself into this, and I haven't experienced every single strategy. So, but like, what would you recommend starting out? Do you think people should try out different strategies, or they should do one strategy, or whatever they like, they should do that? What do you think about that?
So here's the thing: there's the right strategy at the right time for the right person. Very few people talk about that, but I think it's really important. So let me break down what I mean by that. So the property market moves in cycles. The property, there's boom, bust, there's kind of growth, there's decline. These are the cycles the property market is operated in over many, many years and continue to do so in the future. The thing is, we don't really know the timings of the market. We only know once something's happened. So for example, when the market's crashed and it's going down, how do we know when it's reached the bottom? Well, the only way we know it's reached the bottom is when we can look back and say, oh, it's now going up, so that must have been the bottom of the market. So it's only looking back we can reflect on where the market has been as opposed to where it's going. But there are indicators to tell us what's happening. So for instance, in London right now, around the southeast, the prices are kind of dropping. In some places it's really slowed down, and a few places dropped quite a bit because the market slowed, and it's quite significant, that difference. It's noticeable. Whereas Birmingham, since probably 2014, where I'm based, the price has been rising, and they just continue to grow. So we're on an upwards rise. At some point, it's going to stop, and it'll kind of drop down a little bit. But when is that going to happen? We're not sure. So these are cycles that happen now. When I started, we were in a recession. So what that meant was most people were fearful. They weren't buying. They were too scared to go and invest. Because they were too scared to invest, there was lots of good deals around. I was just tripping up all the time. I was finding good deals. So I cherry picked the very best ones, and then I'd sell them on and make a fee, because then I was packaging up something which is really a good opportunity. However, if I say today I'm going to go and do the same strategy, I'm going to go and find B&B property and I'm going to package it and I'm going to sell it in Birmingham, I'd say that's crazy. Why is it crazy? The reason it's crazy is because we're in a different time of the market. Right now, the market's growing. We're not in a decline. So it's not so easy to find those deals. I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm not saying they're not out there, but it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. So we have to get the timing of the market right. This is absolutely critical. So depending on where you are in the country, where you want to operate in property, it will also depend on which is going to be the right strategy for you. Then the other thing is, so you've got the timing of the market. You've got to think about your personality. Are you someone outgoing? You're happy to speak to people, negotiate, whether it's sellers, whether it's buyers, agents, finance brokers, whatever it might be. If you're comfortable doing that, and if you have that outward personality, then that's definitely the thing you should be doing. Yeah. If on the other hand, you're very introverted, you're brilliant with spreadsheets and numbers and the analysis and the online research, and if I said to you, I'm going to send you out to go and negotiate these deals, you're going to be way outside your comfort zone. Now, I'm all for stretching your comfort zone, but sometimes people are so far out their comfort zone that they're not going to be able to perform. So it's thinking about what's your natural strengths, what skills are you already have that are going to transfer really well into this, into the property market. So these are a few things I think it's really important to think about. I've done a number of videos on this on my YouTube channel and stuff. You'll find those where I talk about getting that right, understanding yourself, the timing of the market, how much money you have, what time, skilled resources, etc. All these things will help the strategy. Now, coming back to your point about if you're getting started, you're quite young, in your teens, you're looking to get started in property, what's going to be the right thing for you? Well, really, there's three key strategies that people tend to focus on, I believe, when you're starting. One is your packaging deals. You're finding opportunities, whatever they are, you're packaging them up and offering them to somebody else to buy. You don't need very much money to get started. You just need to kind of make sure you're compliant in what you're doing, and you've got deals you can offer to other people. So that's one method. The second is rent to rent or rent to HMO. What you're doing, you're taking a property on and then you're breaking it down to its components, letting out the individual rooms, and you're generating an income. So we started off the conversation in terms of why HMOs produce great cash flow. If I can take a house on for maybe £1,000 a month and I'm renting it out and generating £2,500 after paying my running costs, maybe still making £800 a month, that's a great deal. Considering I don't own the property, I'm still making that kind of money. That's very good money, probably more than what the owner of the property is making. Yeah. Now, the third strategy is rent to service accommodation. Similar concept in the sense we're taking somebody else's property and trying to maximize the income that we can generate on that, but rather than breaking down into individual rooms and renting those out. In this case, we're letting short stays, kind of Airbnb, Booking.com, that kind of model where you've got guests staying for a short while, and you're earning much more than you're paying the landlord after your costs. They're really the three key things I would think about when you're starting out. Now, if you're 15, 16 years old, you're not going to be able to sign a legal contract just yet. So you have to think about how is that going to work. So another tip I would give you is to think about who would be a good person for you to work with. Who is it you could maybe work with? It could be a family member, it could be a friend, it could be somebody already in property that's happy to kind of work with you for you to go out and do some of the work and partner with them and help to build that business for you and for them as well. But it means also that you're getting some support from somebody else or bounce some ideas off, because property can be a lonely business in the sense that it's just you on your own going out there doing stuff. You've got your phone, you've got your computer, and you've got a Facebook group or something, and that's it. But if you could work with other people, it will actually reduce your chances of failure, massively increase your potential results by having the support and not trying to do it all on your own when you're starting out. Because it's about not having the knowledge and the support, the two things combined with the mindset. So you might have the right mindset. I'm absolutely driven. I want to work for myself. I'm entrepreneurial, and what I want to do is build a business for myself. Great, you've got the mindset, you've got the drive. But now you need the knowledge as well. You need to know the how-to. So you can be picking up little bits of information, putting it together, working out, and sort of, for example, on rent to rent, I've got a couple of really good videos that really break down and explain rent to rent as a concept and how to do it. So you could learn that knowledge, but then the support is the key factor. As I said, I've been in property 14 years. I've learned from many, many different people around the country in terms of property. Some have been absolutely phenomenal, and some have been, let's say, probably just a complete waste of time and charlatans, because there are unfortunately some of those in our industry as well. And even now I have mentors in different parts of my business because I continue to grow. So having the right support is key. So you've got the three fundamentals there. You've got having the right mindset, you've got having the knowledge, and then thirdly, having the right support around you to really increase your chance of success.
Yeah, that's a really good answer, because I agree as well, because when I started out, I didn't really have a support or like a person who would guide me. So I just, I think the first offer I ever made was on a HMO, and it was a stupid offer. I think the rent I was asking, I thought it would cash flow around 500, but when I actually sent it to someone, they said it will be negative cash flow. So I think, having the knowledge, because I knew what HMO was and how it worked, but actually having that support behind you and all that is good. My other question is actually related to that, is if a teenager like me, who I know there's courses out there, they're like 5K, 12K, whatever, but like a teenager like me who can't afford that, or the parents wouldn't pay for that, what do you recommend for them? Do you recommend go to someone who's successful and maybe try to shadow them, or I don't know, work for them for free? What would you recommend for someone who doesn't really have money to pay for mentoring?
Absolutely. Look, so there is mentoring and support you can get. I mean, I run programs from £6,000 to £40,000. That's quite a sizable investment. People are making a huge return on those investments, but that's not for everybody. And also, some people may not be in the position to really be able to afford those kind of investments. Particularly if you're a teenager, you haven't got access to that kind of money. So how do you get started? And I think you've touched on a key thing there by approaching people that may be willing to help, and surrounding yourself with the right people. It's getting that right environment is what you ultimately want. A number of people you can talk to. So, for example, trying to get to local network meetings. Even at the network meetings, it might be £10, £20. And that can be quite investment that you need to make to do that. So you could go along to network meeting. This is how I used to go to my first early network meeting. I'd go along and say, look, can I help out? Can I just kind of help? I can put the chairs out for you. I can help with the registration. I can help out with some of those things. And by doing that, what I was able to do, at least get into that environment. Now I didn't have to pay to go to the meeting, but because I was giving something up, like time to help out, it meant I was in the environment. And the registration desk is one of the best places to be, because you meet everybody that comes through the door at these events. You get to speak to everybody and say hello to everybody. So that's kind of one way. Just get involved in local events and meetings that might be happening that are close to you, that you can go along, that they maybe want some help with. And ensure that you're kind of active on various Facebook groups. There's so many groups out there. Look up for ones that are supportive and positive, and that you can kind of put stuff out there and get good feedback on how to do that. And there are some very good groups and maybe some not so good groups out there. Just like everything else. So you're a very good demand there. So a lot of people want to try and get hold of you.
Yeah. Sorry, just someone calling from my brother's phone. Yeah. So yeah, when a lot of teenagers, what I realized was when I spoke to them about what strategy you want to get into, I think because we're teenagers, we like the money side. They usually look at the money side of the business. Do you think they should not look at that angle and actually look at it as what they actually may like to do, or which may be suitable for them? Because I'm not going to lie, teenagers, they do like money. And when I was speaking to some people about property, about in school, they were like, yeah, which one makes the most money? How can I make money the most quickest? And I was like, well, it's not a real thing about property. It's not like a get rich quick scheme, because for me, it took me 6 months to actually source on my first deal ever. There's a lot of failures and actually just going out there and doing the things, and you're going to fail a lot. There's going to be a lot of you're going to burn a lot of bridges until you get to that point. So what would you say to those kind of people who are kind of that money minded about all of this property stuff?
Yeah. So I get it. I understand that there's a drive to make money. Money gives you choice. It gives you freedom. You kind of want to have things. Even if you want to kind of help other people, you want to make a difference in other people's lives. Ultimately, you need to be in a position yourself that you're in a good place so that you can help other people. I give up a lot of time in kind of helping and supporting people. Happily kind of give you some time with this video, kind of run the events for very little money. I don't really make any money out of that. Why do I do all these things? Because I genuinely want to try and help and make a difference. But it's not all about money. If you are absolutely focused on, I want to do this because it makes money, I can promise you this: property is not a get rich quick scheme. Most of the people that I know that come into this market with that mindset, they don't last 5 minutes, because they realize how difficult it is. Property is very, very hard work.
Yeah. It's
a simple strategy, but it's not easy. It requires a lot of effort, a lot of persistence. You'll get a lot of setbacks, you'll get a lot of knockbacks. And, we're talking quite large numbers money-wise, right? In terms of financially, you can make a bad deal that could wipe you out quite easily. Yeah. So it's really important you understand what you're doing, and you understand it's a long-term business. When you think about property, and when I said to you, what got me curious about properties, when I look at the Sunday Times rich list, the amount of people that keep money in property or make money from property is phenomenal. But when you think about that, you realize it's generational wealth. It's taken decades and decades to build, and it will last for many, many more decades. It will be handed down 2-3 generations if it's done properly. These things you can't build in 5 minutes. They take time to build. They're long-term strategies. They are not get rich quick. Those people that are kind of come into this market thinking, I'm just going to make quick money, they're the ones, I promise you, absolutely promise you, they're the ones that are going to get burnt. They're going to mess up. They're going to just the whole thing's going to implode for them, or they're going to cost other people money because their mindset is in the wrong place. They're driven just by the money. Think about building a business. You start something with solid foundations. You find something that there's a demand for, whether it's, so for example, service accommodation rooms, or whether it's a renter and HMO rooms, or whether you're packaging and sourcing deals on. You find a demand for that product. then you create that product and you offer it to the market, and the market rewards you by paying you for it. And if you do a good job, you build a great reputation, and it grows from there. It's not a get rich quick scheme for sure. It's absolutely the wrong mindset, and I see a lot because there's so much money to be made in property. Yeah, that's the thing I want to do. That's what I want to do. And I completely put my hands up and say, look, when I was a teenager, I was just completely driven by money as well. That's what it was. I was obsessed about, I want to make money, I want to have these things. Why is those kids got this and they've got, and I haven't got any of these things? It's not fair. And I didn't come from a very comfortable family. We struggled along to kind of get by. As the only son, 2 sisters, and my father was ill for a very long time. We didn't have much money, and I think, why haven't I got those things? Why have they got those things? And that created the drive in me to want to build something. And yes, when I realized I was rushing, that's when I'd mess up. But when I take a step back and think, look, you got to think about this as a long-term thing you want to build, and you've got to create things that people will reward you for. That's essentially what it is. It's got to be fair trade, and it will take time to build that, but then it will last for a long time. Those that think they can skin the cat very quickly, you kill the goose that lays the golden eggs, you last 5 minutes in this business.
Yeah, that's really good. Like, I've seen it a lot with teenagers. Because they see the flashy cars on Facebook and Instagram. They see the 18-year-olds who have the Mercedes and all that, and they're like, oh, how do I make a lot of money? And they approach me and see I'm in real estate, and they're like, oh, how can I make money quickly? And I tell them it's not about that. It's real thing about it. It will take a lot of time to make for you to get your first deal. And I think you shouldn't. Well, I think you should try, when you're a teenager, you should try out different routes. Like, if you want to get into real estate, just try it out. Maybe, but the thing is, most people may not even like what they're going towards.
Absolutely. You've got no idea how much work is involved and how difficult. You just said it took months and months to get the first deal. I said that, I grinded for 2 years before I made any money in property. I was about to give up thinking, this thing isn't going to work for me. It might work for other people. I'm just struggling and struggling. So, I was at that point before the first deal came through and I started to make some money. So we really shouldn't be focused on just the money. We need to understand it's a business we're going into. You could go and do some work experience in an estate agency, a letting agency. It's not quite the same as what we do, but it gets you into that environment. You start understanding. If you're interested in business, if you're interested in making money for the long term, there's one key skill I would say is absolutely fundamental that breaks down into 2 things in business, which are so important. And I say this to my kids. I've got 4 kids. I've got 2 daughters and 2 sons. They're 12, 20, 22 and 27. I have to think about it when I say it. So, they're kind of some of your ages, some a bit older as well. And I drill this into them all the time. I say, look, there's a key thing you have to master, and that's communication. It's how effectively you communicate, whether it's on video, whether it's face-to-face, whether it's in the written form. You have to be able to communicate effectively. Business is about people. Communication is a skill that means that you're likable, you're credible. If you can communicate effectively, you can get all these feelings across. People make decisions based on how they feel. Then they're justified with logic. If somebody's going to buy a used car, they turn up at a car lot. If a car salesman rushes out to them, so what do you think? Shall I show you this car and stuff? No, I'm okay. I'm just browsing. Because if they really like that person, then they think, okay, is this car, do the numbers stack up? If they really don't like that person, it doesn't matter if that car was the one they were looking for. They're unlikely to do business because they make decisions on feelings. So if you are a great communicator, you can influence outcome. You can get a message across. You can sell your idea. You can get the concept across to somebody. And from that, 2 things break down, which I think are the most important parts of business, is marketing and sales. They're both based on communication. Marketing is the ability to be able to bring people to you and to have an interest for a particular product or service you have. And the sale is then the transfer of your enthusiasm to them, for them to be enthusiastic and want to part with their money into that particular product or service. Now, we think, how does that translate into property? It translates into properties, whether you're dealing with sellers, whether you're dealing with investors, whether you're dealing with brokers, agents, whatever it is in property, the vast majority is about people and relationships. If you master the skill of communication, sales, marketing, they're all linked together very strongly. If you master those skills, it doesn't matter whether you choose to go into real estate or you choose to go somewhere else. I promise you, you'll be very successful in life and business, and money will come to you when you master those skills.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. You don't really realize what skills you need until you get into it. When I got into property, I didn't know that you needed a strong mindset. You need sales, negotiations. Then when you actually start speaking to agents and landlords, you realize you need all of that. And my other point was, when I used to, at the start, when I used to get HMOs from agents, what I realized was that because the landlords know what they can get for their money with the HMO, they usually charge high rents, so you can't really negotiate it down because they know what they can get for the HMO. And I was speaking to some other people, and they said they usually just go for landlords who don't know what HMO is, and they just convert their house into a HMO out of their own pocket. Do you recommend doing that, or like how would you go around that?
So firstly, it ultimately depends on what's the outcome you're trying to achieve. So for instance, if you've got the cash to be able to convert a house, the reality is it costs quite a bit of money to convert a house. You've got fire doors, fire alarm system, emergency lighting, you've probably got to furnish it as well, maybe tidy it up a little bit, maybe decorate it. You know, if you do that, that's several £1,000s that you're putting into each property to rent. Now, I'm not saying that's right, and I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying you need to be aware if that's a strategy. Now, let's say you're talking to somebody, as you mentioned, a landlord that knows their houses can generate X amount of money and they want more from you, otherwise they're not interested in giving it to you. This is where your skill for communicating and negotiating and influencing comes into it, because it's around questioning and understanding the other person rather than going in and say, this is what I want, this is what I want, give me this. Talk to them about them, understand what they want. Why are they even having a conversation with you? Why is it that they want to achieve whatever it is they want to achieve? And what's the single most important thing for them in being able to get this transaction done? These are the kind of questions you need to be asking of your landlord to understand them before you make a proposal. The mistake many people make, they go in, they crunch the numbers, say, yeah, this is what I can give you for this. What do you think? Do you want to take it? Yeah. Oh, you don't? Oh, okay. What about if we did this? That's not really negotiating. That's just haggling. That's just street haggling. Yeah, that's like when you go and buy a bag of potatoes at the market and you haggle over a few pence. That's not negotiation. Negotiation is with really understanding the other person. Then you take that into consideration. You look at what you can offer and see if you can make that offer fit like a glove. That a proposal then hits the nail exactly on the head. And the answer from the other person should really be that's kind of exactly what I want. So let's say you've got a landlord that's a little bit more challenging. They want a much higher rent and you can't see that work. And you say, look, Miss Landlord, you know, I'd love to work with you. I really like your house and I'd really like to work with you in this way. Now, if I was to pay you that rent, the risk for me is because I'm doing this, it may not work out. I might get my fingers burnt, and I really don't want you to suffer as well if I can't pay your rent. I want to create a situation where you're happy, I'm making some money. This is not going to make me rich. This is going to get me progressing forward. You're going to get someone who's going to really care about your property and look after it. So what would we need to do to make that work for us both? So you see, you notice I slowed my voice down slightly, because what you're doing, you get into more of an emotional state rather than speaking really quickly and really fast when you're having that conversation with them. You're trying to get them to think about it in that way. Now, some people won't. They'll be not interested. This is what it is. Then I would be more inclined to have a conversation about potentially joint venturing with them. Say, well, look, you know, you've got the house. This is what you're thinking. What if I work with you? What if we get it set up and we do this together? I'll run around. I'll get it set up. I'll get the tenants. I'll do the ongoing management, and we can share the profit. You'll probably get X amount out of it that way as well. That means I'll generate some income out of it as well. So you can move the conversation more towards a joint venture if someone's being really difficult with you and not budging on numbers, especially if you know they've got a good property in a good location.
Yeah, that was really good advice, because when I first got into HMO, I realized they knew what they were getting for the property, so they wouldn't really budge. And and the last question I wanted to ask was that I know property sometimes it can be stressful, and because sometimes you may be stressed out because you may have made a mistake, maybe money on the line. What I wanted to ask you was that how did you get through times like that where maybe you thought the whole thing was going to crash in on you? You know, maybe you had to, like, you made a stupid offer, or maybe something happened. Like, how would you deal with that?
So, as a first thing, some of it comes back down to communicating this effectively as well. So, if we've made a mistake, if we can be open about that mistake and speak to the other person it's affecting, And usually it's not as bad as we think. Quite often we become fearful, we build this monster up in our mind, and we think, no, the whole thing's going to fail. If you're paying too much on a property and you're struggling to make it work, I'd go back to the owner and talk to them in that instance. And I'd say, look, I know we spoke about this. I really need to speak to you. I am really, really struggling, and I'm so embarrassed to be having this conversation with you. And I'm losing money, and I can't sustain it, and I'm not sure what to do. And I really don't want you to suffer because I think it's not fair on you. And I wanted to ask, what do you think we could do here to work something out? So you're not even saying, can you reduce my rent? Yeah. You're asking, what can you do? You let them come up with something. Because here's a really a thing that I learned that made a huge difference for me. End of the day, people will do business with people they know, like, and trust. You have to give people an opportunity to get to know you, like you, and trust you so they can do business with you. When you're open and honest that way, you go back to and you talk, say, look, I'm struggling with this. And sometimes you'll renegotiate it in a way you're letting them suggest what's the solution rather than you telling them. If they haven't got a solution, you should be prepared and ready to offer something. Say, look, as I said, I'm embarrassed to be having this conversation with you. I didn't think we're going to be here, but we are. And my proposition would be if we can reduce the rent by this amount for the next 12 months, that in order for me to get back on the feet, it means, you'll still get a very good rent. I'm still taking care of your property, and it means I'm not going to be losing money on this as well. So it's not going to have a knock-on effect to you. So, you explain it in that way, and you may be able to get it back on track. But, many times I've been in a situation I'm thinking, oh my God, what have I got myself into, especially in the early days, and how am I going to get out of this? Because I just wanted to try and get moving forward. And at the end of the day, I'm a big believer, I'm very spiritual, I'm a big believer in, God will bless us with whatever he destines is right for us. And having that faith that I've got to keep going and doing the best I possibly can, and then he'll do the rest. But ultimately, I've got to get off my backside and do something about it. I've got to do something positive. And if I'm in a situation I'm really struggling, I've got to turn to people around me for help and support rather than trying to do everything myself. If I can go to people that maybe have experienced that, if I can go and speak to somebody that maybe has a solution to help me out of that, that will be the way to get through it rather than trying to keep everything inside and trying to work it out myself. Because often the answers aren't inside, they're outside of us, and we've got to reach out for those answers to get that help. So
yeah, that helped a lot. Because there were times like that. Like as I said, the first property I offered on, I said, yeah, we're ready to move. We paid the deposit, but then I realized it was a bad offer. So that was kind of stressful. I was like, what do I do now? But I think being transparent with the person, like I told the agent, I said, look, sorry, we did the calculations wrong. I was being transparent. I said, we can't pay this. And they were like, yeah, that's fine. But I think what happens is most people, they, in their mind, like you said, they think it's bigger than it is. I thought, oh my God, I have to pay this now. The agent's going to say this, that. And I just said it. They were like, oh yeah, that's fine, no problem. I'll let the landlord know. And in my mind, I thought they were going to be like, yo, what the hell,
Yes.
But I think if you get yourself into that situation, just be, as you said, transparent. It will work out.
They absolutely appreciate the fact that you've gone back to them and being straightforward about it, rather than ducking and diving, avoiding them and trying to not speak to them and then not being able to make the payments and stuff. That's a much more worse situation to be in. By being open and straightforward and they say, okay, look, we understand. They'll either renegotiate with you and be able to do a deal, or they say, look, in this case, it doesn't work, that's okay. And if it doesn't work, there's no point being down about that. It was never a deal. If the numbers don't stack, that wasn't a deal for you anyway, because the numbers don't work. Your criteria has to be numbers you've calculated that work really well for you, and that's what you need to stick to. So, for example, people talk about £100 profit a room, 150 on a HMO, whatever it might be, whatever the criteria is. Some people talk about £1,000 a month. That's what I focus on as a criteria, as profit per house. Now, if you're looking at stuff that doesn't quite fit that, and then you don't get the deal as well, well, it was never a deal because it never fitted your criteria. So, hope this stuff is making sense. I hope it's useful. Yeah. I'm conscious of your time as well. I'll let you kind of wrap up now as well.
Yeah. Thank you for. I know you're busy. Thank you for this interview. I know you'll help out a lot of people and me as well, because I'm fairly new to this as well. And I just want to thank you, Saj, for this interview. And check out his stuff. I'll link it in the description. His YouTube is useful as well. His Facebook. LinkedIn, all of that. I'll
Some
link.
of my stuff has been flashing up behind
Yeah.
social media stuff. You can check it out. I try and put good content out there, no fluff. Stuff that you'll find really
Yeah.
useful and learn from, rather than just fluffy nonsense. And if you want to meet, I run a monthly property meeting in Birmingham. Just send me a message on social media. I'll send you the details. Pop along to that. Happy to meet and help and support other people there too.
All right. Thank you, Saj, for this interview. And yeah.
Thanks, Kabir. Speak very soon. Take care. Bye now.